So these have all got a relationship to each other. All these clauses. The primary principle of the Act is for the liberties of the subjects. And then it opens with, so they declare, right? And all of it is... all of the clauses explain each other. All of the clauses are helping setting the context and the parameters for this. It goes into the rights of the subjects. The whole thing is about the liberties of the subjects. But the first opening part is all these clauses are setting the context of how they... all these bear relationship to each other. And if you are lacking any description or context, they help give each other context. Every single one is only limited to so many words or so much text. So particularly when, like the Scottish one as well, you know, with the imprisonments, it adds the context of that. But obviously, if you can't be prosecuted, how can you be imprisoned, right? The arms of the subjects is important, that they can bear arms for their defence, right? It says for defence, so you can't attack with them if they're for defence. They're not for attacking; they're only for defending. So that is, it's putting a parameter and context in there, just like with the standing armies and so forth. It's drawing parameters and lines for, you know, drawing weapons and attacking or coming together with armies, particularly if it's against the governments, right? And also, if you can't be held to any commitments for petitioning, then you can't be charged for it, right? And we know that now from the other study paper, because it says that they used to be charging them a fee for it, right? But what it says here, it says freedom of election. It says the election of members of parliament ought to be free, right? So you don't pay for it, and also it's a free process. If it was being held to any commitments, it wouldn't be free and open. And one of those commitments may be to charge you money, right? This is kind of like self-explanatory. You see, on the right to petition, why would it put, right, it's the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all prosecutions and commitments for such petitioning are illegal, and then say, and ought to be free. But it doesn't say that, because the thing is, we know that elections for permanent ministers came out of petitioning, and even Parliament was on and off, and they even petitioned to have Parliament back on. So it has to supersede it and take overriding precedence over it, right? And for certain, if all prosecutions and commitments are illegal, then it's clearly obvious that the fees are illegal for it, because they used to be charging them for it. And if you can't be held to any prosecutions or commitments, then you can't be held to a fee. Why do you need to just say the fee if it's illegal? The thing that the election of Parliament, members of Parliament, ought to be free, well, you can't charge a fee for that either, right? You clearly can't charge a fee for something if you can't be held to any prosecutions or commitments. And they've invented these liberties so forth because they were holding them to all these ridiculous things before. Not only prosecuting them and so forth, and then charging, and in Lord of the Rolls. And the thing with Lord of the Rolls, I like the Lord of the Rolls because note that the Lord of the Rolls, it uses the word Lord. Whether it actually was a Lord and Baron or not, or whether it's something like the Inquiries Act now when you have a special temporary position. You've got Master of Arms, King of Arms even. King of Arms is King of Arms, but he's not the king, but it signifies, it's a special position. If it's Lord of the Articles, who was in charge of petitions, then it signifies the House of Lords, doesn't it? Even if it's a special reserved title, it's not the Grand Jury, and it's not Magistrates of London even, and it's not 3 justices, it's the Lord of the Articles. So if you petition in Parliament or either a House, they've got Lord of the Articles, it's definitely not a judicial process to the criminal court or the civil court locally. Clearly not. but it is a form of judicial process for sure. You see, the freedom of speech, right? Remember that we've already got that it's the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all prosecutions and commitments for petitioning are illegal, right? And you would have to speak about such things because they were prosecuting people for speaking in meetings or in public and all manner of things and so forth. Even though in private meetings they were prosecuting them for all those things. That's why these liberties are created. So they're not going to include this in the petition clause. But they're not. I'm not kind of trying to tenuously argue these, but all these processes are connected, and some of them are compatibly interchangeable because one process leads to the other, or it's part of the process. For example, the election of members of parliament ought to be free, right? But it says that they were petitioning to hold a parliament because it had been dissolved and they wanted to have a parliament again. So they were petitioning for it. So if you're going to charge them for that, for petitioning for it, and then charge them again for electing the ministers. No, you're not going to charge them for any of it. You don't. The election of members of parliament ought to be free, right? Now, can you be prosecuted? Can you be prosecuted for it? Or is the election of parliaments through by petition? Well, it appeals to the House of Lords by petition, and when you question if any of these elections are, if you challenge them on their authenticity or legitimacy through the courts, that's a legal proceedings. In relation to the election is illegal proceedings. According to that paper, the research paper, they put an end to charging a fee. So in these rights and liberties, all prosecutions and commitments for petitioning are illegal. Well, you petition for them to bring the parliament, to hold a parliament, and for to have an election, so you can't charge us for the petitioning. By the way, don't try charges for the elections either. Surely it means that. Surely it's not like surely it's not. It can't be. We can charge you for the petitioning, but not the election. It's they were ripping them off and trying to charge them for petitioning, and they put a stop to that clearly in the rights and liberties. And by the way. Don't be charging us for any elections either. Clearly, when we can't be held to any commitments for such things. I would suggest that when it says, I strongly believe that when it says all prosecutions and commitments are illegal, right? That is more of a catch, like a throwing the net to catch the lot. So I would suggest that the election of members of parliament ought to be free. That is an example of one such commitment that you're not to be held by. So it's not going to list all of them, is it? It says all commitments, like as if there was one. All of them, as in there were loads of them, many of them. And here we are. Further on, here's an example of one of them, which is given it's in its own right. The election of members of parliament ought to be free. Well, why? Well, clearly, if they were charging them for petitioning, and they put a stop to it, and then they made up an entire act, which is, setting out the liberties because they were being subverted, then clearly you can't be charged for petitioning if all prosecutions and commitments are illegal. And then, when you get here, and and by the way, don't be trying to pull it with us with elections either, or at least charging a fee. There's one such commitment. Freedom of speech, that the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of Parliament. Well, that would be illegal prosecutions by the King's Bench for matters that are only debatable, decidable in Parliament, and by other diverse and arbitrary whimsical courses. So, this is the thing. There are the courses, the circuits of the judges that went around. But there are also the courses and circuits you might go around to get people to support the petition and tell them about it, and then go and hand it in. It's meant to be poetic. It's meant to have. This is the poet laureate. This is meant to be what the, this is meant to be the panache in it. But it's not meant to be misleading. It's meant to be, But I think some of it is lost on us because of, in the contemporary time when this was written, they were a lot more well aware of why they were doing it and what things they'd been through, like the Civil War, and then all the rest of it with a lot of the articles and so forth. You to remember why. So, and matters that are decidable and debatable in Parliament are brought by petition, which is your casework. It's so similar to the policing of the laws. The police have liberties and immunities by going about their work to bring a case to the criminal court. There are things you need to do to bring a civil case, but they're less well known because we don't really have, there isn't like, you usually have to pay for your own lawyer or do it yourself, but it's proceedings and it requires evidence. You can get subpoenas or warrants and orders, so forth, to compel documents through civil proceedings and so forth. They're, things that need to be done out of the court, subpoenaing a document, it doesn't just magically appear there. You have to pursue it. Same with, bailiffs and so forth. But that's like the other side of the proceedings afterwards. So the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings in Parliament. Well, proceedings in Parliament are usually speeches and debates, but, how do they get into Parliament? You've got to have, procured the subject or matter that you wish to have debated, and possibly you can get it debated by petition if you collect enough signatures. So it has to encompass that. And there were people having meetings in private or in the streets, going about things getting prosecuted. It wasn't actually necessarily for the petitioning. We need to get that clear. It doesn't invent petitioning. It's there 1661, and it's even there well before that, which they said. It's the fact that, they were saying that, just by opposing the king, or, treason and other things. So it's not inventing the process either. In any court or place out of Parliament. Well, that's it. It's outside Parliament. It's in connection. It's the whole thing. It's the proceedings and what proceedings entails. It's similar to very, very similar to criminal thing, encompassing the whole police and afterwards up to, even bailiffs or even carrying out sentences and so forth. The brackets, the expanding around the proceedings. I don't really know, what the question is. You see, you don't really have to pay for criminal proceedings. It's all paid for by taxes, isn't it? Unless you're found guilty. That's the thing. It happens. It takes place, and you get it investigated, and you get the proceedings. It's all paid for by the taxes. This is the thing. They didn't charge people for elections or petitions, and you can't. But the thing is, if it comes out of the taxes, doesn't mean it's free. Like the police are for free because we've already paid for them. But then again, the thing is, there used to be this hue and cry, right? And there used to be some voluntary people who didn't get paid. And I think that's important because some of the periods the MPs were in, it's voluntary, isn't it? The MPs were voluntary for quite a long time. It was a voluntary position, although privileged, and a lot of, they had the voluntary people to do the policing with hue and cry and so forth. that's what I'm thinking, like the whole thing facilitated for free. But what they kind of do now is, even though I think this clause is still in effect, they still charge, but they've said in some of the local acts of law, it says, like, a referendum or election can't cost so than the facilitation of it can't cost more than so much money. It's interesting how these candidates like Trump or so forth raise funds and money for their own independent campaigns when it used to be voluntary. If it was voluntary and they didn't get paid for it, they wouldn't be able to pay for any campaigns, The whole thing seems like a voluntary thing, and then you would have thought everyone would get a free voice, like in the town centre on a pedestal or so, like everyone gets 15 minutes on the soapbox or whatever. But now it's kind of become competitive with the political parties and funding and so forth, who can throw the most money at it. And even if they can't win with money, now they seem to be trying to, change the law so they can win, or change the county borders so they can win. And the voice of the public seems to be, really put on the back burner. I think what happened to Parliament is the political parties took over. And then I think that what's happening now is the same is happening, given that a lot of these political parties have got connections and investments in these companies like Rishi Sunak. And these companies are taking over, and they're even suing the government, suing Parliament for potential profit effects when, all these companies together, they're actually, what about us suing them for our health effects? And they're even trying to make a law. They were even trying to make laws so they were immune from being sued from health effects. That is absolutely scandalous. That is so contemptuous, possibly even treasonous. It could be treason, trying to stop these companies. This WHO World Health Organization has got immunity. But the thing is, how can you... If companies are making foods for us that are causing health effects, and then it seems like one big entity owns them, and they know that, and they've got a big responsibility for his health, but they carry on knocking out cartoon adverts advertising food, careless, and say, it's our fault for eating too much, and then they're doing science, study, psychology to try their best to make us to buy more of it, and even mock us, and then force us to watch the adverts so we can't block them. It's absolutely... I've been watching some of these American senators and some of the other officials in American government, and they're in La La Land when MSNBC crew and all these American people, no, it's about 1% of the stuff should. Well, there's not 1% of the people. There's only about 1% of it that we should be blocking, but we need to remove free speech. Well, why are you making a big deal out of it if it's only 1%? There's more than 1% of people being removed from YouTube unlawfully or by errors of the system, or when they don't even have the right to remove us, And then there's the whole Pelosi thing and profits and money being made. There's only 1% of MPs who are making loads of money out of the decisions they make in Parliament or Congress. I think before this Parliament and this Senate, before they, attempt any changes on free speech on platforms, why don't they start, making reduction, removing themselves, removing the legal right of them to be able to own companies or businesses that are affecting from decisions, or even having shares in them in Parliament while they're in term, at least, because that is just... for them to be saying, you can't say what you want, but, it was, if there was money being made, I think, if some of these MPs were making money out of people's free speech, then it'd be different. No, they can say what they want because I've got investments in that speech. The problem is that the kind of speech that we're saying freely is the kind of speech that is affecting their profits, and the kind of speech that they're suing the government over when they want to change the laws. Ironically, which that is the ultimate, that's treasonous. I think that is treasonous. But all these clauses relating to each other, it definitely is. They did hold that, actually. I've just watched Richard Tice on Talk TV, just briefly on YouTube, and they were talking about Parliament Street. They actually held, read that Peter Ackroyd book, Histories of England, Volume 3, and they actually held, during the Civil War, Parliament was held in Oxford for a period of time, So, I think this might even relate to that, or give a hint to that, Parliament taking place in Oxford. They had two sort of parliaments, one for each side at the time. That freedom of speech and debates which clearly means in private as well, or the proceedings in Parliament. Well, what are the proceedings in Parliament? It's kind of like, it's almost like, it's this, okay, we'll say the same thing again, but differently, because proceedings in Parliament are freedom of speech and debates, ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of Parliament. Well, you can clearly have them in any court or place out of Parliament, debate, because that's how you get it into Parliament, by petition, of which they earlier mentioned you can't be prosecuted or held to any commitments for. And if you can't be prosecuted, then you've clearly got the freedom of speech, because you can speak freely how you can only have your speech restricted if someone would threaten you with legal action of it. It's all, I think I'm exhausted in commentary on it, other than if we actually, get every single bit of piece of history we've got and line it up, untangle it all like a big ball of wool, and then, you will see for, you can only include so many facts that are relevant in there, but it's clearly obvious what it is and what's happened. It's been pushed aside by the current political parties, and now they've got bigger franchises than pushing us aside in our political rights. They're trying to push us aside all over the place with their big companies